Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co host, a man who has lost track of how long he has been here and how many visits he has made overall.
Tim Longo.
A man who has noticed that this year the gulls have shunned this place.
Tim Longo.
A man who sometimes feels as if he has given birth to this island.
Tim Longo?
A man who feels as if everything has conspired to this one last shipwreck.
Tim Longo.
That's our last. That's our last shipwreck for the intro.
That last one was the one I got.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah, I got the first one, obviously, because that's the first one I wrote down. I had to go hunt down a script because I wasn't going to play it multiple times. Those who've been following along since our discussion last week about Gone Home know that we are doing a little mini series inside of our series of walking simulators. Because we want to talk about them a little more deeply, and any individual game doesn't necessarily have a lot to discuss. And with Tim not having a lot of history with the form, it's also good just for him to see a few. So we're kind of doing that. Whereas we spent, I don't know, 4 episodes on Fez because there was a lot to talk about in that game. With walking simulators, you kind of need a little more, I think, just to get a sense of them. So we have turned to the one, arguably, which started the indie craze for them, which is Dear Esther. And as was pointed out to me in pre-show, we probably should have started here. So.
Well, this is the only one really I think that I had played before, and I didn't think of it either. But I didn't have the comparisons, right? So I wasn't really sure where things went.
And because there's not a lot of mechanical depth, we could just sit here and recount the stories and things like that. But I don't think that that's necessarily interesting or gives a full picture of kind of the indie spirit and et cetera that we're trying to kind of tackle in the larger series. So I do think it's a good way to tackle it. Just to kind of get some perspective or see evolution. We'll be able to compare this against Gone Home from last week, and then forward to next week, the third one we're going to do, which is the Stanley Parable, which also was a source mod, as this one started out as, or is made in the source engine, I should say. I believe it started as a source mod as well, and then was made into a full release when it was popular. So it was an interesting mod scene, something they talk a lot about in their commentary. But before we get to the Chinese room, let's talk a little bit. I'm just going to breeze through these because we just listed all these games, 6 weeks ago with Fez. This is the year 2012 of, and I'll list the ones that are connected to games we've played first, and then I'll hit the indies and the kind of other ones towards the end. Dishonored, Halo 4, Diablo 3, Kingdom Hearts 3D Dream Drop Distance. That's one we didn't catch last time. Forza Horizon, New Super Mario Brothers U, Far Cry 3, XCOM Enemy Unknown, Alan Wake's American Nightmare, Hitman Absolution, Assassin's Creed 3, Max Payne 3, Mass Effect 3, Borderlands 2, Darksiders 2, Spec Ops The Line, Dragon's Dogma, Fez, Journey, The Walking Dead, Hotline Miami, Spelunky, Papa E.O., Bastion, and Super Hexagon. Whew. I just blazed through a whole lot of games. I kind of put the triple A, or maybe not triple A, but sort of A or double A with those sort of Spec Ops and Dragon's Dogma as ones that kind of broke out of kind of established molds. They're in a shooter and RPG in this year. So even some sort of experimentation going on that end of things as far as the budgets go. But yeah, we talked about this year, like I said, just a few weeks ago, a couple months ago. So let's not dwell on that. Instead, we should talk a little bit about Chinese Room, and I'm going to throw that over to you, even though I've probably played more of their games.
Yeah. So, the Chinese Room, I mean, they are currently owned by Sumo Digital. They were purchased at some point, 2018 maybe, or
Yeah,
2017.
2018.
Yeah, Dan Pinchbeck, Jessica Curry, and Rob
Briscoe, Rob
Briscoe,
Briscoe. He's
who
not.
is technically his own company,
Yeah,
I
he's
think.
got his
Yeah,
own company, but he
who is
worked
art, but
worked
they're
on this.
both on the. They're all three of them are on the commentary. Yeah. So a small company for quite a while that was definitely started with modding the modding scene. They did win, I believe, the Seamus McNally Grand Prize for a couple things in the Nouveau Award that year for IGF for this game. Um, and I do remember that being quite a interesting year. I think that's probably why I ended up eventually playing it, because it kind of rose above. But a small team, and they've kind of definitely they've had their ups and downs over the years. But ended up with Sumo Digital ultimately, and I think they're all still there, though it looks like Jessica is also doing independent composing. But yeah, Dear Esther, they did a few mods. Um, Coruscovia, which I don't know, that was right before this one, or a couple years before as a mod. They did eventually take over Amnesia franchise for a time. I think there's a new one coming out, right? Or there was one did come out after. They did Amnesia, a Machine for Pigs, which is described as an indirect sequel, which isn't a term you hear very often. And then Everyone's Gone to the Rapture, which people probably know, which was that also a mod?
No, that was
No,
not.
that was
That I think is carrying on from their strategy of moving to Unity, because I believe that was also a Unity game.
yeah. Let me see if I can figure that out quickly, but I
No,
cannot.
no,
Let me
I
see.
believe that's true. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
it says CryEngine.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
What do you
Huh.
think about that?
They're just shipping around for finding the right engine, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you got
I
to.
mean, there's a lot of foliage in that game, so maybe that's why. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of
Well,
foliage in this game, but
that's
it's
kind of that feels like a joke there. That's I know that they were prided themselves on foliage, but it's they didn't own it. But yeah, anyway, it's
yeah.
I take that as a good joke. Little Orpheus. So under um, while at Sumo, that it looks like they've done a few different things. Little Orpheus still wakes the deep. I don't know those games, but the most important thing that relates back to the kind of to the podcast in a strange way that is sort of their current situation. People may remember the announcement that they have taken over Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 from Heartsuit Labs, and that is currently happening right now.
Yes.
Although that was, they were fired. Okay, so actually they've been on that project for quite a while.
Yeah, for a while, for a
Um,
number of years now. Because when I was out there in 2019,
yeah, right before COVID.
right before COVID, I believe Bloodlines 2 was shook up, like
Yeah,
6 months later at most, maybe
yeah,
less. It might have even been pre-pandemic that it got shook up, and then so that's when I mean, first Mitsoda left, and then later, the whole Hardsuit Labs team was shuttered. That kind of took a while to happen, because I feel like it was a slow moving kind of train wreck. I mean,
yeah,
not that the development, I don't know enough about the internals of that, but just in terms of from the outside, it's like, oh, these people left, and then these people were forced out, and then they decided just to put it on hiatus, and then it was given to the Chinese room. It was kind of like a series of steps to get there.
yeah.
But
Um, and Everyone's Gone to the Rapture, I'm reading, which I didn't know, was a Sony Santa Monica produced game, so it was a PlayStation exclusive, I guess.
yeah,
And
okay.
they actually, So Let Us Melt was in 2017. That was a VR game that they did. So um, for Google Daydream, of all things. So
Wow.
they've
Okay.
really done a lot of different things. I got to hand it to them and tried. Little Orpheus was an Apple Arcade game, so that was mobile. Looks like maybe exclusively or mainly. Um,
Oh,
and then
that would be why I hadn't heard of it.
still Wakes the Deep was Xbox Game Showcase in 2023. So yeah, so Bloodlines. I mean, oh, and then the other tidbit I'd say is that as of 2023, there were over 100 people. So talking about this game and how modestly it started, and where they are today is quite a journey for a studio. I've always wondered why their name is the Chinese Room, but I've
Do
never.
you may not be familiar with the philosophical
Oh,
question of
definitely
the
not.
Chinese Room.
Oh
So
no,
this, I'm
it
not going to
seems a little troublesome to me, but okay.
well, it's not. It's using Chinese as a language. Okay, so it's let's see. I can't remember. It might be Jonathan Searle. I can't remember
Chinese.
who.
Actually, I mean, I have Wiki open
Well,
here.
no, I
Chinese.
know what I know. Hey, give me a
Oh,
chance here.
okay,
I just
okay.
don't remember who the philosopher is, but
John
it's
Searle.
yeah, okay, it's
Searle.
Searle. Yeah, okay. So it's a thought experiment. It's sort of akin to the Turing test,
Mm,
where you put somebody in a room with a Chinese language dictionary. And they have a similar interface to them where they can't see the people that they're speaking to. They don't speak Chinese, but through interaction with the outside, they're given prompts in Chinese and they can only reply in Chinese. And the question is, they can ultimately, through pattern recognition, whatever, reply in such a way, that they, are generating decent responses in Chinese but never understanding the language. And so it's kind of like the opposite of the Turing test and sort of saying, you know, computers can respond in patterns, but that doesn't mean they have semantic level understanding, which is, meaningful understanding of language, which I think is
yeah.
pretty accurate to where we are right now in terms of AI. They are, repeating patterns
It's
back, but they're
not AI.
exactly. It's not intelligence.
Yeah.
It's something else, right? It's
Oh,
transformers, right?
yeah.
So I think I think that's
Yeah. Okay, I get it. I get it. Yeah, yeah. So it's just funny that that it could be called something else. It doesn't have to be Chinese. Is my
no.
point,
It could be
right?
any language that is is
Anybody who doesn't speak the language that they are testing is,
correct. Yeah.
and I assume John Searle is a Westerner, so he called
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
the Chinese Room,
That is for
which
sure
is
true. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
But it is sort of it is sort of against the sort of Turing hypothesis. I mean, in a way,
yeah,
is
yeah,
that
that's
you couldn't
fascinating.
actually say that the machine has or even you wouldn't say that that person knows Chinese, right? So, by example, it's like, okay, then you wouldn't say a computer understands English just because it can respond in the same patterned way, right? Like I
Right,
said, as it currently kind of does.
right.
So,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, a bit of my long time philosophy interest coming back to help there.
Well, I think philosophy it comes up. I mean, it makes sense to to a large degree as far as like why we'll talk about it a little bit later because they did add a commentary to the landmark edition, which we both played, and you went through the whole game again with it. I only did. I didn't get time to finish the first chapter, but I got quite a bit of the early commentary. But clearly, they're a philosophical. They're very philosophically driven as far as their creative process. They also, have I guess Dan has said that people like William S. Burroughs have influenced the game in the way that his writing was, which I'm not too familiar with and don't really seek out, but I understand why he might be bringing it up. And so the fact that their company's named after a philosophical test or what have you, it makes a lot of sense. And this game, I think, falls right in line with all of those sorts of, all of those sorts of concepts. So interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's what they're doing. I mean, hey, the next thing we might see from them could be Bloodlines 2. And if that happens, that will be a freaking video game miracle.
Yeah. No kidding.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they even at the time of this landmark release, they had already grown to I want to say more like 25 people. I mean, they have in the credits they have the current staff of Chinese Room listed alongside like the original, um,
Yeah, yeah.
makers of the game. So um, but yeah, we kind of alluded to it earlier. This started as a mod. It's just really funny to me that they have gone from mod to source engine like full game to Unity full game, and then moved on to their next thing, which was CryEngine question mark. Like that's a bizarre thing to me, but
Mm.
like I don't know why you would do that. Although there have definitely been cases in the past where the grass is always greener. But it started, I think you said 2008 was when the mod came out. Um,
That's
and
what the official release is. I know you mentioned in the commentary they talk about 2007 because they probably were working on it in
yeah,
2008.
well, and I also think that they, in the mod community, often things would get released and there'd be kind of like a, multiple releases before they were like, nope, this is it. This is we're done now.
Yeah, yeah.
As things got developed kind of in public, especially as they looked for feedback and, as a small team, right, getting fresh eyes would have been important to them as well. So putting it out there in sort of limited ways as they were building it was probably useful. And at that point, it was just Pinchbeck and Curry, I think, working on it, as well as their narrator, whose name is Nigel. I want to say Carrington. I don't have that written down in front of me, but
Yeah, I have it here. I just had it.
you have it. You had it there. You mean? Um,
It's gone.
Okay, it's gone. So I apologize to Mr. C. I do know it begins with a C. Uh, I already sort of indicated something that I did not know about the game, and we'll open into a topic about that kind of
Yeah,
off the
Carrington.
jump here. It is Carrington. Okay. That this game, contrary to my expectation and personal experience of it, actually is fairly, I mean, not deeply randomly constructed. The macro of the game is the same. The overall quote unquote plot, which is something we'll also discuss in the future, is the same from playthrough to playthrough. But how that experience is colored, the tone of that, might be changed by getting different voice lines for each of the cues. The original mod, there were three possible cues for each, versus the re-release in 2012 with four, which is effectively the version we played. And there are also places in the game where there are sort of props, you know, things that are on tables, for example, which are honestly often hard to see. So we'll talk a little bit about that too, because one of them is like really important to them, um, and would really change your view of the game, or would really
Oh,
color your experience. But I didn't see it. I mean, I was playing on a TV. But the way I discovered that this game had randomness in it was I started playing on the PC, and I quickly started having motion sickness problems. I dialed up the FOV. I put the little crosshair on the screen, and it continued. So I was like, okay, not playing this way, because it doesn't take me long to be like curled up on the floor if I'm feeling that in a first person game. So I shut it down, came up and played it on the TV via the PlayStation 4 version, and I had played, yeah, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and had just heard a line, and when I got to that point again, I was like, that is not the same line. Um Remotely. Like, it was very different. And I wasn't really looking for things to be different in the environment. So it definitely prompts the question, why has this game got randomness at all, Tim? I'm throwing it out to you. You're the designer.
yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about this, I'm sure, various
Yeah, yeah,
times.
yeah.
The sort of macro topic of games that are typically played once with that have random elements to them. What is the value, and how do you value that? Especially with large majority of most players, especially for a game that seems like story based game and semi and fairly linear. People don't typically seek out a lot of community engagement on that kind of stuff. They do, that does happen, but it's a very small percentage, we know, statistically. So it's sort of like, well, what, it's hard to justify. I didn't know it at all until listening to the commentary, which I only again listened to the first chapter. And not even, I didn't get through all of it, but I think I got through probably 80% of it anyway. And so I think Dan pretty clearly says in the commentary what his goal or what his sort of interest was, and that is, that every time somebody plays the game, they have a different experience, different interpretations, different thoughts about what's what different takeaways essentially. And he even specifically mentions that the concept of people going to forums and discussing what they experienced and what they saw and heard, and then how different that would be for other people. So, the core fundamental idea, which I completely agree with and I applaud them for doing, but is always tricky because it's often lost on most players that it even is happening, is that is the inherent value, in my opinion, for interactive medium. And so it's awesome that it's here, but diminished, I guess, in its effectiveness because I didn't know it was happening.
Yeah.
Now, the first time I played would have been the 2012 version. I didn't play
Yeah,
the
me too.
mod.
Yeah.
And so I had a vague memory. But as far as like any sort of plot points or any sort of like concept of what my takeaway was from that version of the game, with one exception I'll talk about later, which I don't remember and think I would have remembered, something that happened to me this time that didn't happen last time. And
I'm guessing it was underwater.
it was,
Yeah.
it was,
And
yeah.
I bet I can identify exactly what it was because I had it different in the feedback, the commentary playback versus the first time I played it this time.
Oh, okay, yeah, we should talk about that then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, I would say it kind of that aspect of it comes out of the fact that it was a mod and highly engaged with a modding community
yeah,
at the
yeah,
time, is like their
a lot of this
audience was
concept.
going to come and discuss it
Yeah,
because they were in there talking about mods, right? And that was like, it was a smaller, and this was not a for-profit thing. This was not a commercial release until 2012. The original one was just a mod you could just download and add to Half-Life 2. So getting that sort of discussion out of it, I think gave it the legs ultimately, right? Is that
yeah.
made
Yeah,
people
putting
excited
it in
about it.
context makes a difference for sure. I think the interesting thing, though, beyond the modding community, once it broke out and it's winning, you know, Seamus McNally awards and things, kind of that does elevate it into more of a conversation. And I actually remember being at GDC that year, and I definitely, obviously missed it because it must have been talked about. But how could all of these years,
Yeah.
knowing this game, playing the game, having played the game back then, and having it be such a touchstone, how did this not come up more? Like, how is this not like one of the most important parts of this, in my opinion, now is that the narrative is not inherently consistent and linear for everybody. That's
Tim,
actually a really pretty big deal. So
in 2014, I taught this game, and I did not know until today.
that's amazing. Yeah, that's what
I
I'm
mean,
saying. It's like
we taught it with we may have had Gone Home. So students had a choice. So we actually had a few walking simulators we talked about. So we talked about them more as a class, and I didn't individually study them in
yeah,
further
right.
depth at the time, right? And so there was kind of like, we kind of gave them the choice, and most of them I think picked they probably picked the shortest. I mean, they're college students. What are you gonna do? And that probably was Proteus, right? I think Proteus can be played in like under an hour, and this is a little longer. And certainly Gone Home is a little longer. So we probably spent most of our time talking about Proteus. But yeah, I mean, it's hilarious to me that I had no idea. There was no commentary, so unless you went and engaged online about the game to sort of, which is kind of funny because it's we do this every week, right? But in general, when I play games, I don't. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like I don't. I'm playing something, and I just won't talk about it at all. Um,
Especially games like this, I think,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
That
yeah,
that seem to be of a certain goal in mind, right? Where it's
yeah,
like I wouldn't. The only thing I was thinking about going to look up, which I'm glad I didn't, is interpretations, because I was like, I have no idea what's going on. I finished it again, and I was like, still not sure, still not, playing it for the podcast. And yeah, nah, not really sure. I mean, some vague thoughts, and some things about, you know, what are those stones you get? The medical issue,
oh,
gallstones?
kidney
No,
stones.
kidney stones. Yeah, so there's
Yeah,
a lot of kidney stones being
kidney
talked
stones
about.
came up a bit. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so it's like I was like, what's going on here? So I was like, maybe I should look it up. I don't. I was mixed because it's like I don't want to influence the podcast reaction. And then I listened to the commentary and was like, oh, okay. Then I'm glad I didn't look it up because it kind of doesn't matter. I think that was Dan's point, which I did appreciate, is that he said something really interesting. So if anyone has any interest in this game, has played it in the past, didn't know it was random, especially, or did know but hasn't listened to the commentary, which I guess is part of the newer version, highly recommend it if you have interest, because I didn't even finish all of it, but I can totally see from what I listened to.
it was also, I think, a free. I don't think I separately bought
Oh
the
yeah, no,
landmark
me either.
edition. I think it
No,
was a free update. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I didn't buy Landmark for sure, and I just when I installed it, it popped up. So
yeah,
yeah, so very fascinating. But he specifically said something. Sorry, I'm a little off track
yeah.
already
Go.
on your point, but he said two significant things to me, which I loved as a designer. One, that and he's more on the writing side as well, so he kind of does it all, of course, and I'm not as much a writer, but um, he said something like, you may remember him saying that, why can't writers have the same freedom
Yeah.
as visual artists and musicians and composers do when it comes to the poetry and the sort of dynamic nature of games, and having the abstract quality. Like, what if the words didn't completely make? He kept saying things don't need to make sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Even like writing on walls or whatever. And then he also said, he actually referenced Halo, and he said, you know, we wanted something like, we wanted our 30 seconds of fun as referencing Halo. Um, and ours just happens to be 30 seconds of depressing,
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
depressing poetry.
yeah.
It's like that's their loop. And he actually saw it as a loop, a gameplay loop, which is fascinating to me and really exciting. And so I'm glad I didn't look up interpretations. Still don't fully know
There's
what's going on.
there's not 100% answer. Maybe, I mean, we should probably go into. I want to.
I mean, I'm looking at Wiki now, so I am
I have
having
a
things
couple. Yeah, I have
spoiled.
a couple things. Yeah, I have a couple things that I want to go to. First, I'll give a little listening to the commentary anecdote and how it like made me wonder if I had like Candy Camera on me in here, which is a very dated reference, but I'm sure there's some equivalent.
Wow.
But I was there and I was playing the commentary. I don't know if you got to the part where he talks about cellar door.
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. So he gets to a point where he's like they're why Dear Esther, and he's like, well, I really just like the sound of it. There's this film Donnie Darko, and Drew Barrymore's in it. Tim, what did I watch Saturday night? Donnie Darko.
Wow.
Okay, so
Wow.
this goes deeper because it's even stranger. So he's talking about how a cellar door is like the most beautiful, supposedly the most beautiful phrase in the American, the English language. And some people will say, oh, it's because it comes from the French, and in French, it says it's it's cellar door, which means it's the golden hour. There's like all these theories around cellar door and why it's so beautiful. But he said he felt Dear Esther had the same quality, of just a lovely little, series of phonemes. And I was like, yeah, that's really wild. But here's the kicker, Tim. So I watched Donnie Darko Saturday night. The first time I watched it in 20 years, probably. And I got to that part and I was like, I forgot this was in here. I forgot Drew Barrymore was in it. I kind of remembered the rabbit and whatever. Lately, I've also been playing Rogue Legacy 2 again.
Oh.
Because it's on, it's leaving PlayStation's whatever. And who's the studio that made that? Cellar Door.
Wow.
I was sitting there listening to this guy talk about Cellar Door and Donnie Darko, and like having just like this morning played this game by Cellar Door. I was like, what is going on? So anyway, that was a weird.
That's wild.
It was a weird way the universe rhymed this weekend or this week, the last few days. Anyway, so that happened. But in terms of where was I going to go next? The story. I do think that there are some. As you go through it, there are more or less some facts.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I'm curious, not to interrupt, but curious to know with the randomization how they have factual consistency or not. You know what I mean? Like there could be a version. I'm wondering if there could be a version of through the randomness where certain things are not shared, where you know what I mean?
And this is why
this whole time I thought Donnelly was somebody else.
Okay,
you know what I mean? But I think Donnelly is the narrator.
He could be the narrator, so that's the thing. So yes, so like the facts, I think, and again, thinking of it as more of like a poem than than prose. I think it is less explicit, but the things we know for sure is that Esther was a woman killed in a car crash on the M5.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, until after finishing and seeing some of the things on the wiki, I didn't fully know that. I figured there was a car crash. I wasn't sure if anyone died. Like I'll tell you should keep going and then I'll tell you some of my theories.
And then the other thing that we know is that Donnelly caused that crash, and that the narrator is somehow involved with Esther and is grieving this loss. Now, we don't actually know that the narrator isn't also Donnelly. And there are, in fact, that was an interpretation that came out of the mod community for the original mod that they actually added a little more support to in some of the lines they added in the expanded commercial version to actually support that as a possible reading more directly. Not that this is not a game that tells you what happened. But I
don't even know if there is an answer.
Yeah. No, there's not. There's not a solid this is what happened. But basically the stories of this man dealing with his grief, either because he caused this accident, which was a drunk driving accident. I think that's pretty consistently true as well. And he keeps coming back to this grief that he just can't let go of. And
that's true. The narrator could be Paul then.
Right.
There could be an interpretation.
Yeah.
Well, although I don't know why he'd know Esther, but
yeah. So, well, her last name is Donnelly in one interpretation, in one voice line as well. In my playthrough, her last name was Donnelly. So he could be her husband. He could be Jacobson, who,
was a shepherd apparently. Yeah. At one point, I thought Paul's last name was Jacobson.
Well, so that could also be true.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the kind of crazy,
that's the point. Yeah, it's like don't.
I was surprised that listening to the whole commentary that he didn't talk about David Lynch, because I was like, this is so Lynchian. This is Lost Highway or Inland Empire are the two that really most strongly come to mind, because there are literally characters who change in those movies. Like in one case, in Inland Empire, it's Laura Dern is multiple characters, and in the other case, multiple actors play the same character. Um, in Lost Highway, but like to me, that was like the same kind of dreamy.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
There's an overall arc, but like or I don't know, like a Waiting for Godot or something. Like it's like where it's like what's
Waiting
going
for
on
Godot's a
here?
good reference. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's I don't know, close to home for me.
yeah, I know.
Highly
Or True
studied.
North, to put it even closer to home for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's I guess in
I mean, True
retrospect,
True West. I'm sorry.
True West. Yeah. I was searching the databanks for True North, and I was like,
Yeah,
"What is that?"
no, no.
True West. Yeah. Which did you see that? You saw that,
Yeah,
didn't
I
you?
came. I
You came
surprised
and
you.
saw it.
I
Yeah.
just showed up in your audience.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, so yeah, Sam Shepard's a good example. I guess, kind of as we're talking through it live here and then thinking about this playthrough and then the commentary a little bit and then my vague memory, the last one, I I'm really mixed on whether I wanted it to be more clearly. I'll just for the sake of simplicity say more Lynchian,
Hmm.
because I feel like with Lynch's stuff, and maybe it's because I who made it, when you're
Yeah,
watching
right.
one of his things, and so you come in with expectations. But I never got that from this.
Hmm.
It always presented itself to me as this very vague story that I didn't quite understand as I'm walking over across this island. I think my original playthrough, I didn't even completely understand that the island was a metaphor for anything. Right? I thought I was
It
literally on this
it
island.
it might not be.
Yeah,
That's
well,
right.
so
That's the
yeah,
thing.
no,
Is like
and
an island also might be an island, but it might not be an island.
yeah, yeah, and fair enough. No, fair enough. And but and it just could be things when you step into these sorts of doors, these sorts of doorways as a player or as a creator. I'll say first you act, and then you expect your players to come in with you into the Chinese room. No, that's not doesn't work. And anyway, that it's gonna land sometimes, and it's not gonna land other times, right?
Well,
Like
they were
you're,
speaking Chinese to you, Tim. Clearly,
yeah,
they're just
yeah. No, I mean, I think it's very applicable, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I guess it is. I guess it does apply then. But it's like, and I maybe if we have time, I'll share a little bit about my Firewatch experience because I did play and finish that as well in the meantime. So I have these 3 games kind of back to back, and then we'll have a fourth. But um, even though we're not playing Firewatch for the podcast, to be clear, so it's like you have to take the swing. You have to swing. What's the reference? You have to swing hard. Swing.
Swing for the fences.
Swing for the fences. You should have to swing for the fences, but it doesn't mean you're always going to hit for everybody. And for this one, it's like I can appreciate it, but I never quite got that sort of tweak of yeah, unreality or
Right.
something. It
Right.
was just sort of like well written, interesting tidbits that I was kind of half putting together, and then it's over. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that was nice. I just wish
For
kind of
there.
a little bit more on their sleeve, not a
Yeah.
lot because I don't want to hit
No.
me over the
Well,
head with it, but I just,
we can
yeah.
talk about one where I do think they might be hitting you over the head, and then another one that to me stood out playing it before I even listened to the commentary. For me, the subtle one that landed really hard was the when you fall into the hole and then you're in this like blue cave with this very spiky ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
That felt very distinct and unreal to me, which made me think of it as like and maybe an allegory or a metaphor for grief. Like I definitely felt like, oh, he's just gone inside himself, right? And he is, and
Mm.
everything is sharp there, right? And otherworldly and hard to explain and grasp, and all of those things. I definitely felt that, though it is subtle, right? It's it's kind of visual cueing and whatever. There are some things I think in there that that support that, and they talk about some of those things as well on the commentary track. I mean, it's deliberate.
Yeah.
But the one that really, and this is the story bit that I alluded to earlier, that I thought I knew what you saw and didn't see, is there's a point in about the middle of that whole section, towards the end of it, actually, I guess. Yeah, you're after that you basically have a rebirth because you climb up this tunnel and go towards the light at the end of the tunnel and come up back outside. Um, but there's a point at which you are in an underwater place that is clearly not the island, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Can you describe to me what you saw there? Because I suspect I know. Because I could see why what you saw the first time or this time would make you even more questioning, whereas what I saw the first time this time maybe go, oh, I see what happened. So
Oh, you saw something else, you mean?
I think I saw something different from you. I saw it twice because I with the commentary track I got a different random roll because that scene is different play to
That's good.
play.
Okay, that's good. So, yeah, and is that scene? Do you have to fall into that water, or can you
You
skip
do.
that?
No,
You
you
do.
can't. You
Okay.
have to go
Yeah.
through that.
So I think so. Yeah. So I fell into the water, and then you're in this underwater scene, and for me, it was actually on a highway, and there were two cars that were lights were on. It was at night. There weren't any bodies, and the cars didn't look like they were bashed up or anything, but I kind of got the point. It was some sort of car accident, and then you kind of wake up or you leave the water, and then you're back in the cave. So, and
Okay.
I'm fairly confident. And there was no, yeah, that was it really.
Okay.
And he maybe there was narration. I forget if there's narration, um, but I am fairly confident the first time I played this way back when I did not see that scene because I would have
Okay.
remembered a car crash in the middle of this cave, you know.
Yeah. All right. So when my first time, that I saw something similar, although to me the one of the cars was clearly damaged, like had no doors, like or no door on one side or something like that. I can't remember specifically, but I definitely looked at one of the cars and said, "This car's been something bad happened to whoever's in this car," and then the other car had like its taillights on, so I was like, "That car's actually fine." Um, so that's what happened the first time through with me, and then with the commentary, um, and this actually happened when I originally played it, whatever 10 years ago. Um, there was a gurney in the middle of the highway, and that's it. There was none of the other stuff.
Oh, wow.
There's a gurney with a like an IV bag. There's a light like you would have on an operating table, maybe a very bright light on the gurney. There's no person. There are no people in this game. The narrator, but you can't see the narrator's body. You
There's a
look down.
figure on the hill at one point, but
Yeah,
you
they
can't
say
get
it
close to
towards the end, maybe.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
at the
that
very
they
end.
refer to as a ghost in the commentary.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I assume.
yeah, and actually, I never saw it. I even got to that point,
Oh,
and
I
they
didn't
were
see it my
talking about
first
it.
time.
They were talking about it. And I didn't see it. There's another thing that they talk about that I didn't see either. There's like the underground river where you walk over a bridge, a
Hmm.
natural bridge. There's apparently a paper boat that floats down under that bridge,
Whoa.
like shows up later, which are
Yeah.
the letters, but I didn't see that there either time. Like
No.
they were talking about it, I was like, oh, I missed it twice. So there is, I think, like some ellipses like that where it's like, well, they're not necessarily drawing your attention to things either, but like it's the sort of thing where if you went to the forum and somebody said, well, did you see the paper boat? And you'd be like, yeah, there were like a dozen of them or whatever. They'd be like, no, 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 the other one. And you'd be like, what? And you'd be like, okay, I'm going to play again and pay attention to see if I see another paper boat. Right. I could see being in that kind of headspace, especially in an exciting time where there's more um, potential for creative expression, was opening up
Hmm.
in 2007 or 8.
Yeah. The putting this in context of its time and in the industry, and as you know, I don't know how many IGFs we've had, but this would have been probably in the early chunk of them. because they haven't been around forever, I have to look that up, but and so this, I'm glad we obviously played this for our indie series, and then also our walking simulator sub indie series, because I do think it's really a significant example of the time and how how people were trying to, we have good counterpoints, I think, with so far with the games we played for the series, because we have this one's coming from modding community. We have different people coming from different backgrounds and experiences to start making indie games in this era. And it was very, in my opinion, very much a necessity is the mother of invention situation, because there was sort of a need for it. um
IGF
uh
1998, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, a little bit earlier than I thought.
Yeah, I did. I went in '99. I don't remember an IGF, but that doesn't that
Yeah,
doesn't
it
mean
could have been
anything.
small. Yeah, it
It
could have been
was.
really
It was.
super
I.
small, but
It might have even
good.
been
That's
separate.
good that it was that far back then.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
might. Now I want to go back and look at what, what was sort of the zeitgeist of each of those early years.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because my first GDC was 2000. Um, yeah. So anyway, I don't know. It's just fascinating, because I do remember the hubbub, and I think it's fully warranted and deserved, especially in its time. Um, and I think it was so. It's good that we played these, though. Again, we said sort of out of order, probably.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's the word I want. Like, had such a great impact, at least on me, and I think people that that we were talking to. We were at Lucas at the time, and so people. Wait, were we?
No.
No, we weren't. No,
No.
this was later, right?
You would have
So
been.
who I would have been at Crystal, I guess. So,
Well,
um,
2012. If you played it in 2012, you may have been at LucasArts when it was still closing, because it closed
yeah,
in 2012 or 13. We
or it might
discussed
have been
last
a
week.
343 at that
Yeah.
point. Yeah. So anyway, I don't remember who I was talking to about it at the time then, but I remember having, maybe it was you, or
Could
maybe.
have been the same person. It could have been Schmitty.
Yeah, could have been, right, exactly. So, but just that the certain, like, there's sort of like a, flabbergasted isn't the right term either, but it's this sort of this shock of like, wow, this is not something that I would have thought video games would do. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's, and then of course I think the walking simulator tag is a little bit reductive and unfair, even though we're using it. But
Yeah,
whatever. First,
they address that too. They kind of feel okay with it now. At the time, they felt it was dismissive,
yeah,
um, but
yeah,
they also talk about how categories are really broad, and what they're really useful for, genres, whatever, is to um, give people a sense of what they're going to get.
yeah,
Because
fair, yeah,
because he was like, I don't know if we wanted it to be lonely, slow, depressing, as our genre title.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
they're kind of were like, it's not terrible. He's like, first person solo adventure doesn't feel right either, so it's like, okay,
Yeah,
we'll
no,
own
it's
it.
well, it's yeah, own it, and also there wasn't a term for it, right?
Yeah,
You also see first person exploration based games or something like, like
right, right.
that. So there's other things that people have tried to categorize, but it doesn't really matter. But it's just such a minimalistic game at a time that was very rare, and so and I think the fact that now, in retrospect, thinking about the construction of the game that I didn't know about, that it was also trying to do some other interesting things. I'm bummed that I didn't kind of play it more deeply or play it multiple times back in the day, because I think it would have had an even bigger impact on me. But I remember back then being appreciative that it happened, and
Yeah.
that it did actually create a space that wasn't there before. Um, so, oh, and the other side note that I want, as I was playing today, which obviously you're gonna laugh. There's two games that I bring up on this podcast more than I should. well, maybe 3 if you count Metal Gear, but um, one of them came to mind quite heavily. Can you guess which one? As I was walking through this landscape, listening
I
to a
got it.
narrator.
I got it. I mentioned last week it's on my PlayStation right now.
Oh, what were you going to say?
Death
No, no,
Stranding.
oh no, that's not it. Though that's a close one. No, Trespasser.
Oh God.
Because it's like there's that Trespasser is almost a walking simulator in most of the time, and what's his face is narrating during
Yeah,
it a
yeah.
lot of it. So
Edinburgh. Yeah,
Edinburgh. So I had these moments where I'm like, he's talking about dinosaurs, and Attenborough's, even the way he spoke in the film, maybe in the books too. I don't remember. I did read the first one a long, long time ago, but he's kind of got a poetic way that he speaks too. So it fit anyway. Always an excuse to bring up Trespasser,
yeah. I'm glad, and
the
I
true
also
first walking simulator.
it's not what it's trying to do. It's not even a walking simulator. But
You
the
can
other thing,
control your arms.
yeah. See, there you go. Already, it's a walking and touching simulator. The other thing I was actually going to bring up was that evolution of sort of mechanical depth, because definitely what Gone Home brings to the party. I mean, they stripped out everything from Half-Life 2, right? I mean, it's just the walking. And in fact, in the commentary track, they also talk about, well, we had 3 environments because we had Half-Life 2
Yeah,
and a spaceship and your Eastern European city were not the ones we wanted, so we got isolated place, basically, and they made it into an island, right? Which was born of other constraints. They didn't
yeah,
want you to feel like you could leave, right? But they didn't want to have arbitrary boundaries either. They wanted it to feel like a real place. Um, so so they were kind of like, well, guess that's what we got, because they had no art modeling. That all came later in the commercial edition with Mr. Briscoe, as we mentioned earlier. So yeah, I thought that was pretty hilarious. But comparing it with Gone Home is like, let's just take out the shooting. We'll have a bunch of the other stuff you would have, right? You're crouching and
right.
picking things up and audio logs. And I mean, I guess this also has kind of audio logs, but it feels more like an internal discussion. It's just like he's going over this again in his head. He can't stop himself, and he's depending on which voice lines you get, I guess might feel that way. So it was pretty cool. I do recommend playing the rest of the commentary, because I thought it was really interesting. um, and it's funny because I almost never. I mean, I can't remember the last time I actually played one of those. I don't really do that. I think I'm in the Tacoma one a little bit, because they just did them for Gone Home every time, and we had one for Jedi Starfighter, which I've mentioned before. We might have been the first. I'd love to have somebody prove me wrong on that, but I think we might have been. Um, and you were on all 3 of those, I think, right? It was you and Darren and whoever the
No
designer
memory.
was. Yeah, I think
No memory.
we
Half
had
Life
3 of them.
2. I mean, Half Life 2 did them, right?
Right, they came out. Yeah, but that's after Jedi Starfighter. But it also came out later that they added that.
Yeah, it was not with launch, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
a special. But the thing I loved about it is it was interactive. It was like through, like they did here, where you're going through the
yeah.
game
You go and
and
you click
triggering
on them.
them. Yeah.
Yep, yeah. Same in Gone Home, which is.
Oh, I didn't realize. I guess I missed the ones in Gone Home. I should maybe go. Maybe I should go listen to
I can't
those.
remember if you have to turn it on. I think it's one of the modifiers you can select. So you think you have to go into the options, or I
Hmm.
can't remember. There's a way to select the modifiers. Oh, it's when you start the game. There's a button for modifiers, and you don't have to
Yeah, got
select
it.
it, so you could just skip right over it.
Got it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I wonder if Firewatch did them too. Then it's funny. Those are all. They're all.
I believe they did. Yeah, later the
Yeah.
same thing where it wasn't at launch. I don't think. I think they added it.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, it's interesting.
there there is one other interaction in this game that you almost certainly missed. I missed it, so I can't imagine you saw it. Um, I only looked because there's a trophy for it, and I was like, "What is that about?" There are 4 urns on the
Oh,
island.
whoa.
They are, I would say, they are crematory urns. They're described as ceremonial urns, but because of what happens if you look at them long enough, so if there's one in each chapter. If you find it and look at it, the ash blows away. It's like on its side, there's ash on the ground that covers off, and then the ash blows away. So it's like, yeah, it's pretty dark, to be honest.
Yeah, I got a line about ash. You may have gotten it too, as far as ash being the best fertilizer or something, and then
Oh, yeah,
talking
no, I
about
got a different
bones.
one, but he did talk about crematory ash specifically in my case. So, or
Wild.
crematorium. Yeah, yeah. It is. I mean, I had to, of course, pull up the script so I could pull 4 intros for the episode, but uh I when I got to the point today where I was like, actually, well, when I got to the point where it's like, oh, I wanted to get the intro. It was actually when I started on the PS4. I was like, I want to get the intro because I had made a couple notes of the words so that I could just look for it, search it out later. Sometimes what I do, and I looked it up, and there were 4 intros. I'm like, what's going on here? And it just didn't even register. And I kept playing, and then I finally got to a point where I got a line, and I'm like, no, I know that's different. That I went and was like, oh, this game has
Mm-hmm.
multiple. Like I didn't even recognize. I looked at it on a website and did not even recognize that there were 4 different ones for the
Yeah.
beginning of the game. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah. It's just I mean, I guess it's very cool and telling and weird that even after all these years, um, that's still a
What
discovery.
was unknown to
I
us? Yeah.
Yeah, and I still think, and and that just could be on us, but I still would say if you were to poll players, I bet you it's a very small percentage of
Yeah.
people that know that that's actually
You
true. Which I'm not saying
I
it shouldn't
honestly,
have been done or
no,
that they
no. I
should
mean,
have
I
done
think
anything
you,
differently.
yeah, I think, in setting it as time, we kind of justified it already. But I think the thing that would have to have happened was you played it reasonably close together, not more than 10 years apart. Um, and you got 2 different scenes in the underwater section.
Yeah.
Cause I think you would go, like, I think I saw the gurney for the first time today. And I think I definitely would have gone, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
At that point,
Yeah, that's a
if I
really
played it
significant one.
like
Yeah.
6 months apart or something like that, I would have been like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, I don't remember this." So, um, I will tell you one more significant random item.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't notice. I mean, the items themselves, I felt like they were low res enough for me to
Yeah,
not
they were
think they were
hard
significant.
they
So
were
I
hard for
didn't
me to
really
read.
even
Yeah.
look very, very hard.
Yeah, and, it should be noted that in this game, although there is a flashlight, you don't have control of it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
you can aim it, but you can't turn it on or off. So if you go into a building that's dark, the flashlight just comes on and then it goes off when you leave. Um, I looked kinda closely in the first room, in the first building that, right at the beginning of the game.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I looked at, some of the books, and, like, the problem is at the distance from the TV, and this is a 1080p TV, like, the resolution wasn't really there, and it was dark. So I didn't really look too closely again later. And we'll see if this hits you. Um, one of the props, and this is later, I think it's in chapter 2. It's in the bothy, a word I had to look up today. Um,
Yeah.
there's
No idea what that is.
that's a like I would think you would know because you're a guy who hikes around, but it's a temporary structure that people can just use, or not a. I'm sorry, a permanent structure that people can use temporarily for hikes.
Oh, we would call, yeah. I mean, we
Yeah,
would call them a hut, but yeah,
right. Yeah,
but it
yeah.
must be a
But
British, maybe a
yeah,
Scottish term.
I think it's a, like, my parents have hiked the Lake District, and I think that they have them there as well. And I never knew the term either. So, um, anyway, in the bothy on the table there, if you look at the table in some playthroughs, like 25% of the time, I guess, there will be a picture of an ultrasound.
Mm. He mentioned that in the
Yeah,
commentary.
he mentions it in the first hut as well,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
think he's actually referring to later where
Referring
they
to
really
that one. Yeah. Yeah.
they make a big deal about it when you're at the bothy in the commentary. And I I mean, I registered it originally, but I was like, man, if I had seen that, that would have really colored
Yeah,
my, playthrough.
that's big. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
big.
I mean, it like intensifies either the guilt or the grief, depending on who you think you are. Um, but
Hmm.
it's definitely an emotional intensifier. So it's yeah, quite a choice. Also not in the original mod. So that's something they added. Okay, well, I want to talk before we go to our outro. I want you to give me a little Firewatch. Because you said you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to again, we're not playing it for the podcast, but just relevant because I'm kind of we're playing these, and so it was on my mind, and that's one that I had missed and wanted to finally play, and it's got a lot of. I thought that it was going to have a lot of me in it, as far as because of its subject matter, but it turns out not really.
Well, there's that one drawing of Henry that looks a
Yeah,
little.
right. Yeah, which is, I assume, dynamic based on your description,
It
right?
is,
So
yeah,
mine
yeah.
mine was another game, by the way, that you're in the thank yous for. So
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you're all over these walking simulators. You even
I'll tell
worked
you.
on one. Oh, well, I don't know
Yeah,
what genre Tacoma is, but
Tacoma is too. It's got a little more mechanical depth, but it is effectively the same.
okay. Well, I'll have
Yeah.
to play that next.
Huh.
But yeah. So the only comment, because we're not playing Firewatch, so I'm not going to get into too much detail. But the comment that I wanted to make, as kind of now playing this one, really helps make my point a little bit better, even between the three of them, is I don't think, because I'm not that familiar with this genre and I haven't played that many of them. In fact, I think now these three are the only ones I've played. um, I guess I never dawned on me how important your perception of the character, for me at least, this is for me, how important that my perception of the characters are is to my enjoyment of the game, because the game is focused around you know everything but deep systems and mechanics. They have some, but they're not the point, right? The gameplay, like the traditional gameplay definition. I still love that they are games, and I still consider them games, etc. But the other elements, like music, like tone, like audio design, like visuals, all become heightened because they become more important. And then, most importantly, the story and the writing and the voice and all that stuff becomes important as well, right? Because those become the focus areas for me as a player, at least, because like those are intensified because I'm not focusing on how well does the thing play. And so if I don't enjoy the characters or relate or have them sink in or connect to them in some way, or care about them, then I'm not having as good a time. And so with Dear Esther, it was like I said earlier, almost too vague, like
Yeah.
not knowing who I am, not knowing exactly. I don't need to know. Dan makes a really good point in the commentary that it's like video games have always been, and have been for forever, so exposition based, right? It's like, what's happening. Everyone knows I'm a lore nerd. It's like, what are the facts, right? What is the canon of this world? And that's a disservice, I think, to the medium, and also a limitation. So I appreciate that Dear Esther is not trying to do that. But at the same time, I didn't really care that
Mm.
much about the characters, and so therefore the impact, I think, was less. Gone Home completely nailed it. If you're going
Yeah.
to play one
Yeah.
walking simulator, that is, in so far of the three
Yeah.
I've played,
I know
that
that's the
is
one. That's the one that would hit you for sure.
that's
Yeah.
the one. And it's believable characters they care about. The pacing and I'm getting into maybe some takeaways area here, but it kind of sneaks up on you. It's just very well laid out as far as story character goes. And then I thought that was going to be the case for Firewatch, especially because of the subject matter. But it didn't. The characters didn't land for me. Like, I didn't care. I didn't like them. The sort of like reveals for what was actually happening, kind of was forced for me,
Mm.
and like the whole conceit of it was forced. And so it felt like it was trying to go after. I don't mean to be too critical on Firewatch, because I liked a lot about the game, but as far as like the core thing for me that I wanted to appreciate about it, ended up just not landing with me. So that's just my perspective. But when I had played Gone Home so back to back, and it felt like I think with Firewatch they wanted to have that sort of connection with the player, with the situation and the characters, and it just I don't know, for whatever reason it didn't have the same impact and didn't land for me.
Yeah.
Until only slightly, not to the degree that Gone Home did, and partially I'm bringing in Firewatch because I want to talk about how good Gone Home is. To be honest, I don't mean to be critical of Firewatch because it is a really really great game, but for me it fell short on that regard, except for, which I wish had come a lot earlier, the last moment of the last part of the credits, which is so
the camera.
The camera is so ironic because and maybe, and if this was their goal, and to their credit, if this was their goal, then kudos to them. If the buildup was all to that point, then thumbs up, I'm with you. But didn't feel like that was intentional, though. That it was kind of like not an afterthought, but it was like it definitely was a post-credits scene, because I forgot that there were some snapshots already taken.
Yeah.
And the last one is him. I guess I can spoil, but the kid when he was just arrived, I guess, and younger.
Yeah.
And that was like a wow moment. That was like that hit you hard. But it's like up to that point, like I didn't. I was like, why? What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. I mean, it's also possible to miss stuff in that game as well. I think less so probably than. Well, Gone Home's pretty good. I mean, it's probably about the same. Where you might you might miss some things that make you more connected as well, right? That's a thing that can happen in these walking simulators, is you walk right by something,
could be.
and you miss it, and that one thing that would have actually more tightly connected you, is not there, and that again, we're getting ahead to takeaways a little bit, but I appreciate you taking me through that, because I was going to ask you afterwards, but it makes just as much sense to take you through here. Originally, I thought I would do a questionnaire or quiz about Dear Esther, but as I realized that it was randomized, I decided that was unfair because all of the answers could have been, well, it depends. So you might have been able to ace it. Well, it depends what audio you get. So we didn't do that. Anyway, we will come back next week. Did we already say what we're playing next? I feel like we might have mentioned it, but we're going to...
I don't remember.
Okay, we're going to play the Stanley Parable next. Again, something that started as a source mod and then it became its own release. So if you were sticking around till now, you know that now. Thanks for sticking around. You can shoot us reviews. Haven't had one in a minute. We always love to read them on the air. We think we're a 5-star podcast. I hope you do too. Or you can shoot us an email at devgameclub@gmail.com. We're on the web at devgameclub.com, where you can see the whole history of all the games we've played. And my co-host here twitches occasionally at twitch.tv/
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
I was going to do a gag where I ask you 4 times what you're playing, but instead, why don't you just tell us once?
I'm going to go back to Outer Wilds this week.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's still installed on my PlayStation as well. So I might get back to that.
That's a wild game so far. I'm only 1 session in, but
yeah, I know.
You can see.
I watched some of your playthrough. There was somebody made a good clip, and it was shared on our Discord, which is fan run, and there's a link in the show notes. You're like, oh, that's not good.
I haven't been to Discord. I just, public admission, I have no idea what's going on in their Discord. I haven't been there in ages.
Yeah. Our intro, I know. It's okay. I see it all. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers, and our logo, the Discord, our merch store, all by Mark Garcia. Have fun waiting for the fabric of life to unravel this week, and good night.
Good night.